Welcome to the Happier Life Project, the official podcast from the award-winning mental health and wellness app, My Possible Self. Hosted by broadcaster and journalist Gabby Sanderson.
Hi, welcome to the pod. It's Gabby with you. Today we're diving into the best ways to self-soothe. And no, I'm not talking about knocking back a glass of wine after a stressful day, binging on fast food or pounding the treadmill. I mean the more gentler ways we can be kind to our nervous system. Today's guest is Nahid de Belgeonne, also known as the Nervous System Whisperer. Nahid's a somatic movement coach, breath and yoga teacher, and a nervous system strategist for high-achieving women. With over 2 decades of experience and research, Nahid developed the Human Method, a radical relearning system that uses somatic movement, breathwork, and restorative practices. She then went on to create the Soothe program, a 12-week somatic repatterning experience designed not to add more tools, but rather to help women in particular remember safety at a cellular level. Nahid is also an author. She's written the book Soothe, the book your nervous system has been longing for. It's a brilliant manual packed with simple, practical exercises to bring you back into balance, release held stress, and restore calm by working directly with your nervous system. In fact, I was so impressed with Nahid's book that we've selected it as the Happier Life Project's very first book of the month. So this is in celebration of October. Keep an eye out on our socials and newsletter for more on that. We also touch on it briefly in today's interview. So, what else can you expect from our chat? Well, Nahid explains why true wellness begins not in the mind, but in the body's innate wisdom. We talk about the importance of micro rests to counterbalance micro stress, and why Nahid doesn't believe in sitting in your emotions. Instead, she encourages you to move them out through you. Nahid and I also discuss why modern gyms can be so overstimulating on the nervous system. Plus, you're also going to hear some sneaky ways that you can take more intermittent breaks during your day, even if you work in a busy office or another place around colleagues, without your boss even noticing. Ready to learn how to soothe your system and find a healthier, happier you? Let's dive in. Well, welcome, Nahid de Belgeonne, to the Happier Life Project podcast. Thrilled to have you on the show. This is a kind of new look for season 4 as well. So I actually might as well tell you that we're part of the mental health and wellness app, My Possible Self. And we have a huge subscription-based and an email list. And so what we're going to introduce is a book of the month where we select our favorite book. So I have put forward Soothe to coincide with whichever month this goes out in, because I found it so helpful and so beneficial and just so aligned with what we're trying to help people with. And that's living a happier, more content life, but not necessarily striving for something that's going to achieve that, which is a message we get told a lot. I'd like to jump off actually by saying I picked up the book and, digitally, and I had no preconceptions about reading it other than I thought it would maybe be something I would go to in times of high stress as something in my toolbox to pick up to calm down my nervous system. But as I started to read it, I was like, wow, this is cool. This is actually sort of short intervals throughout the day, which help you prevent from getting to that place. You described yourself as someone who helps people at the peak of their demanding career and personal life who've tried everything and still feel stuck. Mm-hmm. So I wondered, is this maybe why you wrote the book? Because you've come across so many people that are just living on these high and quite dangerous levels of stress. And actually, it's kind of like more of a prevention rather than cure method.
Yeah, it's for sure a prevention method because you don't really want people to hit a wall. But I'm just going to quickly rewind because you've just mentioned so many brilliant things. First of all, thank you for having me. Secondly of all, I am so honoured that you put my book forward and that you really enjoyed it and it resonated with you. It still makes me cry a bit when people send me emails or stop me wherever I am and just thank me for the book because that is exactly what I'd hoped. I come from quite a dysfunctional family, bless them. They just were never taught how to self-soothe by their parents, so they couldn't pass it on.
That's very common, isn't it?
It's very common.
Mm.
And because of that, I think really as ever, this kind of my work is born out of not having been able to help people around me when I was younger and really wanting to help people to just live more fully and inhabit their bodies more and just we have this one precious life and it just feels really sad to me that people don't aren't present and they're not deeply in the process of living rather than that thing of well one day things will get better and one day.
Yeah.
And so to your point about is it a prevention? Actually, it's even deeper than that. It is how we function. So it's working with your biology rather than against it or fighting it. And I think about this quite a lot because I've just come back from a retreat, which I hold a few times a year. In various guises, but this was a week in Greece, which already is medicine for the system.
Absolutely.
And I had a big, not big, it's generally a small group, but I had a really good kind of different section of people, women, a couple of men, who are amazing and brilliant and were struggling. They all came, looking a little bit kind of crumpled and a bit tight and a bit kind of, full of anxiety from their lives. And by the end of the 7 days, they were kind of different people. They sort of almost looked like children again with soft faces. And it kind of made me think, I think about this often, but actually the world we live in is it is really not built for human beings.
Yeah.
It's built to produce and to, for all of us to be kind of efficient workers in some way.
Mm.
And that makes me really sad because actually there's so much more to a life than just working and working all hours to try and make ends meet or to be successful or to be ambitious. I just think we've all gone out, it's all out of kilter.
Yeah.
Whereas if you could more be in, what it means to be human, and that means it means rest and good sleep and creativity, allowing your brain to be calm and soothed enough so that you could let it wander. And
Yeah.
if you look at all the things in our culture that speed you up or keep you distracted or addicted
Yeah.
or anything away from, what it means to be human, I think we need to do something about that. I think we need to really put in, gatekeeping for our nervous system, because if you don't gatekeep your nervous system, nobody else will. I'm going to quickly explain what your nervous system is. It's your brain, your spinal cord runs through your spine, and the communication from that into your organs and the rest of your body, and then back into your spinal cord and brain.
Mm.
So my work involves you kind of tapping into the signals that are coming from your body. So there's more coming bottom up than there is top down from the brain down. And then those signals are interpreted by you, by your brain, based on your experiences so far. So how you might respond to your stress, Gabby, will be different to how I respond and what I think stress is and where my kind of tolerance levels are to yours. And that's all based on our experience. And once you know that, it's so empowering because then you can do something about it. And the idea of these little micro rests in response to micro stresses throughout your day is that you're not shoring it up for the end of the day and then expecting to sleep, because of course that won't happen. So the most appropriate thing to do with the rise of stress, I call it alarm because we don't always perceive things as stress. So if you think about, am I an alarm or am I not an alarm? And that's what your nervous system understands. It's where do I need to be? How do I need to recalibrate from this? And how do I need to respond to something? But if you always think about whatever you do, just kind of have a little kind of recover and reset from it, and then you'll be ready to go again. So by the time you go to bed, you'll have dealt with your stuff and you'll be in a much better place to go to sleep.
Yeah. And what I did really appreciate actually is that it's almost like the book is giving you permission for something that some quite small moments where you are working on your nervous system, like you said, the micro rest. And yeah, just like explaining why it's okay and why it's actually really important to give yourself that time, which goes completely against everything else that we're being fed content wise and, with capitalism and just go, go, go and productivity. And now, we're learning more about toxic productivity and always on, always go. And sometimes that it actually is hard for you to manage because the stresses might be coming in from, say, having an employer that's a bit relentless or a demanding family or, whichever, pick your own poison. Say, and actually speaking of poison, when we're talking about self-soothing, a lot of the time we think we're kind of giving ourselves something nurturing by having that chocolate bar, having that glass of wine, treating ourselves to a purchase online. But actually, the self-soothing here can actually not be so good for us versus the plenty of exercises that you share within your book.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? A piece of chocolate and a glass of wine every now and then is fine, isn't it? And, a nice purchase always kind of perks one up. But is it intentional? So I've probably gone through every single compulsive behavior there is of where sometimes it'll be shopping or sometimes it'll be alcohol or going out and just wanting to fill up my time because I didn't want to be quiet. I found that really uncomfortable. And I think, like many people, they find it really uncomfortable to be quiet because then you've got to think about stuff in your life and we don't want to think. And the culture really encourages you to not think and constantly be distracted. Because, as ever, I think if you do stop and think about things, we might all gather together and demand change or, kind of take over the government or something. Wouldn't that be exciting? So I think these distractions are quite deliberate in an attempt to keep us from really connecting with what it means to be human. And I often say to people that, we have been programmed to mistrust our feelings since advertising became a thing. And advertising was once upon a time called propaganda. And and the reason being is that if you mistrust your feelings, you're much more easier to manipulate and sell product to. And so, of course, our first thing, whenever we have a problem is I'll buy something, I'll externalize it. Whereas actually my method and my work is all about listen to these internal signals because they're there for a reason and they're telling you something. They're not scary. Your emotions won't destroy you. But if you can kind of be open to them, explore them, and get curious about them, you've then got some really good information about what in your life is an irritant and what you need to sort out. And it's a real catalyst for change. And the very first thing that you can do is organize yourself. And organize is a great word because there's no emotion attached to it. It's not fixing, it's not, hacking, it's not starting from a standpoint that you are broken in any way because you're not. You've got this amazing system, this amazing biological system that just wants you to be well and wants you to thrive. We kind of get in the way of that. So really, this book is all about tuning back into how you can access your biology and your intelligent body wisdom.
Well, the idea that our body sends data to our nervous system and those sensations become emotions, which can become thoughts, I think it's quite new to people.
Yeah.
So could we kind of unpack that a bit? Because also sure. I think that we can latch on to the wrong thoughts and that can send us down a path that actually amplifies anxiety as well. So what exactly is going on here?
So first of all, I don't believe that you can think your way out of a feeling state. You need to feel your way out of it. So when you were a baby, you wouldn't have made any distinction between your mind and your body. And if you heard your caregiver's voice and it was warm, you would smile and crawl towards them. So it would make you feel good. You have no language yet, but your whole body, all of your senses are working together to denote safety, warmth, love. And equally, if you hear a loud bang, your whole body would contract.
Mm.
But you're no different now. So as we get older, we think we're really sophisticated and we let our minds take over. But your mind, your cognitive mind, the rational part of you, is part of this whole system, an interconnected system, which includes your physiology and sensations. The sensations that are then interpreted into your emotions, because that's going to be based on your experience. Your emotions then get turned into your thoughts. Your thoughts influence your actions, and your actions go on to influence your long-term behaviors. So your self-image isn't just cognitive mind, that is made up with your experiences. And it's kind of quite a wild idea, isn't it? Because, of course, we think we are whatever we think, our brains, we think we are that. And that forms our self image. But actually, we're a much whole kind of system. And it's a little bit like, Gabby, when you're talking to somebody and you're whispering to them, and then you've got this sense that somebody's listening in.
Yeah.
Well, how do you have that sense? Haven't got eyes at the back of the head. So it's all of your systems. Your skin will react. You might just turn and look, because you sense a presence. So it's all of your senses being really heightened or taking equal billing. Rather than just, in our culture, it's the visual system and then it's our kind of cognitive thoughts. I think, if you want to change how you think, start with how you feel. So just like that baby, if you're feeling anxious, go to your body first. Why am I feeling anxious? What does that anxiety, how does it kind of manifest itself in my body? And I don't know where you take your stress, but mine was always neck and shoulders. So they'd always feel tight. And I go to bed at the end of the night thinking everything was fine, but actually the whole day had tensed me up somewhat. And when you brace in this way, if you kind of think about your whole system like a fishing net, if you've got a pull in one part, a tightness or a constriction in one part, that's going to pull the whole system. So me doing that will just send signals to the body going, I'm in an alarm state. And then that will influence all your other bodily functions, which is why I work with the master system, which is your nervous system. If you can organize that well, then everything comes back into play. So I think the key thing is when you feel your anxiety or your stress, kind of see if you can locate that in your body. And then can you release that, not with stretching, but with resting? So often when you are feeling really tight and sore, it's because you've been bent over like that over a laptop, hunched over a laptop for long hours. Your body isn't built for that. So it's not that sitting per se is bad for you. It's keeping still in any one kind of position isn't great for you. You want to have this really lovely expansion and retraction, just like everything in your body from a cellular level outwards is constantly expanding and retracting. So we don't want to stay still. So movement throughout the day is really important. But when you are alarmed, you have a rise of, your stress hormone, cortisol in the system. And the most appropriate thing to do with that is to move it out. Yeah. So getting up and shaking out of your body is a really good thing. And you'll see dogs doing that. If dogs have had a bit of alarm, the very first thing they'll do is shake it out. When I put my little dog down, he sort of shakes and then he's back in charge of himself. He's kind of recalibrates his bones. So yeah, get it out, get that stress out. I don't believe in sitting with your emotions. I believe in moving them out through you. And then you'll be in a much better biological kind of state to be able to think about what your next action could be.
I think there's like the current stresses, but then, and you talk about within the nervous system, when it comes to storing trauma, holding patterns. How might somebody start to recognize that perhaps some of this stress is manifesting through storing sort of old trauma within the body? I mean, we know the body keeps the score.
That's actually been updated. The brain keeps the score, the body's the scorecard. So so by a neuroscientist, Lisa Feldman Barrett, who's a bit of a hero of mine, I work with movement at the beginning of the process, which is the brain, to affect the end of the process, which is the muscle. So if you want to change, you're going from here to muscle, and then the signals that get sent back kind of reaffirm a story or contradict a story, and then you can take action with it. So I say the very first thing you can do is understand what it means to feel comfortable. People with a pattern of keeping their shoulders up towards their ears don't know anything else. In fact, you're training your brain unwittingly that this is how you function. So, the very first thing I would do is start rolling my shoulders very gently and kind of getting some more movement back there, so that when you understand what comfortable feels like, your brain and your nervous system has this new experience. And what my work does, it gives you this chance, a window, if you like, to experience what it might be to feel something different. And then that puts this new idea into your brain. So, if you think about your brain as a black box, your head is a black box, it sits in a black box, it doesn't know anything apart from the information that you feed it. So everything that you do, from what you look at and what you talk about and what you think and what you eat, will have an influence on your brain and your experience of the world. So if you can introduce new experiences which are to do with comfort, to do with feeling calmer, to do with feeling happier, then you start to expand your library of experiences. And that's how we learn. So that's how we learn as babies. A baby will be lying on the ground and it'll start putting its foot in its mouth and then rolling over and laughing. We're exactly the same. We learn through experience. And so that's why this is so powerful, because it's not mindset changes. And I love mindset work. I think it's great. But this is much deeper than that. This isn't you having to use willpower in any way. It's you actually feeling what the difference feels like. And that's how your brain learns. It compares like, oh, that feels uptight and it makes me feel not very good and my breathing gets shorter. Whereas, this state, yeah, that kind of feels really great. I think we've been undersold movement for so long as a way to either lose weight or to get your steps in or whatever, as a punishment somehow. But we are moving, dynamic organisms. This is how we interact with each other and the world. We move. So yeah, get some movement in. And I deliberately say movement and not exercise, because exercise sounds like a punishment, doesn't it?
A little bit, yeah. But when we talk about movement as medicine, and it sounds like from reading your book, you've been physical or working with the body for most of your life. But then when we are applying it to soothing ourselves and not, like you said, doing exercise or something in the gym where it's all, you talk about stimulation, usually you've got big video screens with all sorts going on. You've got the music blaring. You've got people next to you grunting. There's a lot, isn't there? There's usually
There is a lot.
Right. It's like,
yeah.
There's a lot of stimulation happening there.
There is. Well, I think as ever, exercise, we externalize it and it's been made a commodity so that you go along to these places and they're trying to fit lots of people in and it apes the culture. And actually, you want to be able to counter the culture, so you could easily do things at home, couldn't you? A walk, go for a walk. So getting your daylight into your eyes first thing in the morning, you could go for a walk, you could do something outdoors. But walking is really great. So it doesn't have to be anything more organized or more kind of formal than that. And it doesn't need to be for long either. It can just be short bursts of things. So I like fitness, I like big, strong things. I do weights and I've got a reformer and I jump on my rebounder. But I have lots of different types of movements for how I'm feeling. So if I'm feeling like I've just had enough, I'll lie on the floor and I'll rock my heels, which is in the book. There's lots of lessons in the book. And that is a really good way to recalibrate your bones, get the stress out of you. And yeah, it's just amazing and free. So you can lie on the ground and do that. I do that a lot. I probably did it all throughout the COVID years. If I'm angry, I'll jump on my mini trampoline and just get my anger out. If I'm sad, I do some rolling, all of these primal movements.
Sorry, it was just the image of you, like that's like two opposite kind of, wee, and then but rage, just the trampoline.
But they're all the things, aren't they, that we go through. So I just think being really honest and open about how you feel, the more you allow yourself to feel, which we don't in our culture. But the more you allow yourself to feel, the better language you'll be able to form around your feelings so that you don't say you're stressed when you're not. It could be that actually you have a lot to do. That suddenly empowers you because it then gives you some steps about what you have to do. So can you take out some things from your list? Can you go to bed early to prepare you for this big thing? And on and on. Maybe don't go out the night before and so on. So it really empowers you. It gives you good information to understand yourself. And I think that's the key to having a fulfilled, joyous life is understanding ourselves better, being in better relationship with ourselves. And that's the key to change, because when you do that, you become in better relationship with the people around you and then your wider environment. And here's a really good thing, Gabby, or an important thing. And it's this: when you regulate yourself, you are non-verbally regulating everybody else around you. So you mentioned earlier about a toxic boss. I know when I see people losing their shit, I kind of look at them and I just think, how unregulated of you. Yeah. So I don't kind of think it's my fault. I've done
Yeah.
something wrong. I think, wow, you've got this far and to this high up, and you were never taught any emotional soothing or regulation at all. And I think that's not going to cut it. So I think that's going to be a time of the past, because that isn't very intelligent, and and it kind of shows up a real flaw in people, I think, that they can't regulate themselves. They don't have those tools. So you could turn it on its head, couldn't you, and just kind of go, wow, this person is in pain, they're struggling.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe harder when it's somebody that's like a loved one, I think, to do that, because I feel like somebody that's not very good at emotionally regulating can actually take it out on the people closest to them. I've been on the receiving end of that myself. And
So that's really, really interesting. So I always have a rule that anyone I ever got together with, they had to do something to deal with their own stuff. It wasn't mine to deal with. And any of my younger kind of women friends, I'm like, your job isn't to fix somebody. Don't take on anyone to fix. And we do that, don't we? When we're younger, we think, oh, that's all right. My love can fix them. And then you just think, oh my God, they're actually really toxic. But it depends on what level of toxicity. It all depends on what levels and what, whether you kind of feel there's enough going on that you want to do anything about it. But many of my clients have, they have very demanding careers and kids, and they find themselves doing everything. And their husbands have demanding careers as well, which they, spend a lot of time on and come back a bit angry. But they love them, that, they mean well, but they just don't know how to regulate themselves. And the woman has always found that the more she can regulate herself, the more curious everybody around her gets about, like, oh, that's an interesting way to be. You haven't suddenly reacted to me to make the other person react, and so on. So it really helps to diffuse everything. And if the person that you're with, has a good heart and they're generally good, then it's kind of, why wouldn't you teach them those tools? But, as ever, you can't tell your partner what to do. You have to lead by example, because no one listens to you if you've lived with them for a long time. Yeah, you lead by example, and people get really curious about that. I know that I've for sure done that. And my partner's lovely, but is very internal with his emotions. And I think over the years that we've been together, it's kind of now not so frightened of them, not so, it doesn't lead to a row or, kind of pent up things that suddenly blow up,
yeah,
because he can deal with them, or we can talk about them. He now has the language, but only because he's watched me, and I am a completely different person. I used to have chronic anxiety. I've burnt out loads of times, always a real stress bunny, a real speed bunny. And I almost died of a gangrenous appendicitis because I just didn't listen to the signals from my body. I was just like, no, I'll be fine. And I continued until I had to go into hospital and almost died. So I've kind of been there, and it's not fun. And I remember making the decision, I'm really going to find out about the nervous system, because I don't want to do this anymore. And I had studios in central London. And everybody was seemingly doing the right things, yoga and fitness. And, it's really good for you. But if you're going in with it, with the stresses and the lifestyle that doesn't change, and you go back to that, there's not going to be any sustainable change, because you're bringing all your stresses into class, and it gives you a little bit of respite. And then you go back to the same old, same old.
yeah.
Yeah, once you understand yourself and you understand what makes you thrive, what makes you happy, what makes you feel comfortable, then you can start to arrange your life in a much better way. You've got some good information, good tools to be able to then kind of go, okay, my immediate thing, I can fix my house, I can fix my relationship, I can sort this out, you know, I can resolve things and I can soothe things. And then you can go to your job and kind of think about what little things could be better for me here, and so on and so on. It has this really lovely ripple effect.
So when we're talking about intermittent resting, which
Yeah.
I'd obviously heard of the term intermittent fasting, but it was
Yeah.
you reading your book, I'd heard of intermittent resting. So those little points in the day where we give ourselves a break, could you give me an example of what that might look like?
Yeah, sure. So, first of all, the reason that we're doing it, because if you understand why, you're more likely to do it, right? But first of all, understand that your brain toggles between external sensory processing and internal reflection. So it goes out and it needs to come in and process it, and it goes out and it needs to come in. And that runs on a 90-minute to 20 minutes rest. Yeah. So 90 minutes of focus, 20 minutes of rest. That's how your brain works. Yeah. It's something between 90 and 120 minutes that you're active, and then you have this deep rest from it. So let's just choose 90 minutes. So understanding that, you can then work with it. So when I work in bouts of 90 minutes with 20 minutes off. Even if it's going well, it's like, no, let me just have the 20 minutes off to recalibrate. It then refreshes your brain. So in that I mean, ideally, if you can, I'd go out in the garden, or I might do some movement, or I might do some breath work. But if I can't do that, I'll do something mindless, like tidying up my desk or writing things down on paper, you know, just to get my thoughts out. And when you do that, it allows your brain to go into that reflection, that internal kind of reflection mode, where you can process all the stimulation that you've taken in. Because here's how your brain works. You can't learn and do at the same time. So you have to have a bout of learning, a bout of doing, and then you have to have a bout of not doing so that your brain can process it. And yeah, you could do lots of mindless things, really. You know, tasks that need to be done around the house or in the office, or go for a walk, or go and talk to a colleague. Just get out of your chair and do something else. Because again, if you think about, you know, us being dynamic organisms, we want to expand and retract and expand and retract. And movement is very regulatory. So any sort of movement that you can do is really good. Something that I do a lot is retract my visual system, because your eyeballs are part of your brain. They just got squished out. So when we're in any fixed state, that's going to have that big pull on the whole system. So I do a lot of, you know, warming my hands, cupping my eyes, rolling my eyeballs a little bit. That's kind of a really surefire way to calm your brain. I might do some, you know, change of focus in what I'm viewing. I always think it's just better to get up, because, you know, everything in the body responds better to movement. If you've been sitting and you're a bit slumped, then your discs and your spine get a bit squished and a bit flat.
Yeah.
And movement will help the synovial fluid to kind of pumped back into those discs. In Ayurveda, which is like the medicine arm of yoga, it's always said that if you're juicy, if your joints are nice and juicy, or your whole, you know, system is juicy, then you're youthful, and that's not dependent on chronological age. And then, of course, if you're dried up like an old husk, that denotes, you know, age or getting older. But you can be a youthful older person. So I teach people from their 20s all the way through to my oldest client at the moment currently is 82. And you can really tell the people that moved and the people that didn't move. And then there's like generational differences, but depending on if the culture at the time made you sit down a lot, or if you moved a lot. It's quite interesting in the different sort of populations that I teach.
So if we're saying, like, for people that work looking at a screen minimum 8 hours a day, then getting up every 90 minutes for 20 minutes, I'm not sure they'd be allowed to, quite frankly, with some.
Well, actually, if you look at the day, if you're still having morning coffee breaks, then it might work out quite well, because if you go from 9 o'clock to about 10:30ish, that could be some sort of break, isn't it? I mean, you know what? No one's going to give you these breaks. You've just got to build them in. You just don't talk about them. You know, I say to lots of people, you could do things like, you know, is there a room that you could go and think, or you write and you move away from your computer? Could you just go and do the coffee run? Could you go and talk to somebody? It could be about business. To be honest, Gabby, most of a working day, nobody's working for 8 hours a day. There was a study which was done, because you can't focus for that long. But there was a study which showed that people were productive for about 3.5 hours per day.
Yeah.
And I get that. So the rest of the time you're trying to pretend you're busy. I think the pretense that we have to do probably adds to our stress, doesn't it? It's like I've
Yeah.
got to look like
Yeah.
I'm earning my salary.
Yeah. And the kind of self-loathing as well, because you end up procrastinating a
I
little bit,
know.
don't you? Or
It's
like
because you're
scrolling on
tired.
your
It's
phone.
because your brain is tired,
Yeah.
and you
Any
simply
bosses
need.
out there listening?
I know. Yes. Well, I teach quite a lot of bosses, and I'm trying to program them to think in a different way. The 4-day week has been shown to work,
Yep.
but where's the will? That's what we all need to we need to ask for it. But also a cleverer way to work, I think, is, do it on a project basis rather than being present there. You have a project to do. Here's the deadline. Everyone's got to deliver to it. And you can work the hours you need to. There's much cleverer ways of doing it. And the people in Silicon Valley, the people who are very wealthy, they're not working 8-hour days. So, yeah.
Yeah, it makes me think as well. I mean, it does go against everything that we're conditioned, but like
Yes,
people that don't move from their desk all day and then they're like the thought of going to do a class or, they have to
of
really
course.
force themselves. And that's if they've got the discipline. And then for those that don't, because they're drained mentally, which transitions physically, or like we discussed, it's
Yes.
connected. So then they don't move. So they don't end up moving at all. And it's just then this kind of horrible sort of pattern and cycle
Yeah.
that we're like stuck in.
Absolutely.
Actually,
And then you feel a bit down about yourself, and then you eat food that's not very good for you. Do you know what I mean? You eat a lot of stodged in an attempt to make you feel better, and on it goes. Exactly that. So
yeah.
if you think about movement for your emotional health, I think that's really helpful. I'm feeling sad. I need to tend to myself. I'm feeling angry. I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
And yeah, you can't, as you said, there is a bit of we and then anger. Suddenly you can't feel angry anymore. If you've gone for a nice walk, at the end of the walk, you'll be like, oh yeah, my problems don't feel so big. I've got a rule actually. Whenever me and my husband are talking about something quite big, we walk and talk because that's regulatory. And you've got this lovely open air and then you've got greenery around you so that your whole system is calm to talk about difficult things. Rather than sitting opposite each other, kind of staring intently. You're never going to get a good, coherent answer from someone if
Yeah.
you're grilling them about something. But yeah, being outdoors. So just thinking a little bit more about what you can do to make you function well. And I get it. I work with lots of people who have really brutal working hours, but there's always something you can do. So I'm working with a client at the moment. We're working on one-to-ones because I work online as well as in person. And she is looking after a massive global franchise. And, there's a committee of people above her who all have a say in everything. I mean, just incredibly, incredibly stressful. And then she has a huge team. And I was just like, well, but you've got a minute. Surely you've got a minute before you go into a meeting or you come out. And she was like, yeah, I do have a minute. I was like, you can do something in a minute. Putting your hand on your heart or wherever you feel your anxiety, closing your eyes, taking a breath, slow breath in and a slow breath out through the nostrils. It'll change your physiology. So
Yeah.
why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
As I say, no one else will gatekeep your nervous system. Change never comes from the top, does it? It always comes from bottom up.
Well, it just sounds like such a more lovely way to live, doesn't it? Like,
Yeah.
work for 90 minutes, or if you have to push it a bit more, but then go for a walk and take in
Yeah.
natural light for 20 minutes, make yourself a cup of tea,
Lovely.
then get on with
Have a conversation with somebody because, sharing the problems about, the thing that you're working on again is very regulatory and will give you some new angles possibly. Yeah, but I think you can do it without declaring it. Just don't tell anyone. It's just, get up and go and talk to somebody for 20 minutes and then come back and go, yeah, I feel better. Climb up and down the stairs, walk around the block, do something. But try it. Try it for a day and see if you feel better.
Such simple, great advice. Thank you so much, Nahid. It's Gabby back with you. We are pausing here for today because on Friday we will pick up on the rest of my conversation with Nahid for our next bonus episode. Expect to hear more golden nuggets from the book. We also talk about disconnection from ourselves and from those around us. And Nahid shares some lovely ways we might find connection, even if we don't know anybody around us. We'll also chat about self-image and some of the shifts we can make to perceive ourselves in a kinder way, plus lots more. Nahid's book Soothe, the book your nervous system has been longing for, is available in the usual places you purchase books. You can find out more about Nahid, her courses and any upcoming retreats by visiting her website, which is thehumanmethod.co.uk, and by checking out her Instagram page, which is The Human Method UK. And we've added those links to the episode show notes so you can click directly on them as well. Thank you for listening to this very episode of the Happier Life Project. Just one more minute of your time to run through the important housekeeping. If you are suffering with your mental health, there is a crisis button on the My Possible Self app, which will signpost you to the correct information for immediate expert advice. Those of you who are listening on one of the podcast platforms, the My Possible Self app is completely free to download. You can access all of the content, so you don't need to worry about it costing you anything. If you found this episode helpful, please do subscribe and leave a review and share it with your friends. And to find and follow us on social media, we are most active on Instagram, and you can find us at My Possible Self, and I've been at Radio Gabby. Until the next one, do take care. Bye for now.